morning. I'm pleased to be joined by Tally Zingher, who is the founding partner and managing director of Blue Laurel Advisors, with offices in Tel Aviv, Dubai, and Washington. Jay Sadiq, founder and CEO of FortyGuard, an innovator in climate technology that's based in Abu Dhabi. In fact, I think you're in the same building that we're in Abu Dhabi.
Just next office.
It's a small coincidence. And Anurag Varma, Senior Vice President of Adani North America, part of the giant, tremendously successful Indian energy infrastructure and logistics conglomerate. Thank you all for being with us. So we're in the 5th year, as you were hearing, of the Abraham Accords. And although much of the media and popular attention since that White House signing ceremony in September 2020 has focused on the political and security aspects of Israel's new relationship with Arab states, the economic dimension of Israel's increasing integration in the Middle East has been of at least equal, if not greater, importance in laying the foundation for full Arab-Israeli peace. So let's talk about that economic dimension, how far it's gone, what challenges remain, and who are the main players. And I'm going to begin with asking both Tally and Jay to offer some comments on this. So first, to paint the full picture, let's recognize that business between Israel and Arab states that didn't have diplomatic relations with Israel was a fact of life, an unacknowledged and usually well-hidden fact of life for years before the Abraham Accords. And I know from my own experience of traveling to the region with many people in this audience what kind of business deals were taking place 20 years ago, 15 years ago, well before the Abraham Accords. So there's a history here that is beyond just the last 4.5 years. What are the areas in Israel, the business sectors, that are of greatest interest to Israel's Arab neighbors, and what products or services in Arab states generate interest in Israel? Tally, I'll begin with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. I'm really happy to be here. And let me also first say, we've been wowed by all the Center for the Middle East has been able to do and put forth in the very short time that it's been incubated. And at Blue Laurel Advisors, we're really delighted to be a part of this project and really are aligned with the mission and the vision. And I think that in looking at the photo montage that just went on, you all have been in almost every single one of those photos. And I think we first met in Dubai more than 10 years ago. Yes. And it was around the time that you, way ahead of the curve, had an article published in The National. And so that was unheard of, the fact that someone from the AJC would be publishing in the UAE national paper in 2010, 2011. So thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
We're really excited.
Thank you.
So things have been going on. So yes, this work has been going on for years, although it was transformative when it could become above the radar. Sunshine does truly enable people to have real business deals. Certainly the removal of the boycott law in the UAE was transformative in that UAE business counterparts, which previously were at risk if they were actually engaging directly with Israelis, no longer would be at risk. So you ask in terms of key sectors. It's quite simple in the region because the region is really driven by national agendas. And so I think it's no surprise that the appendix to the Abraham Accords was a direct parallel to the Abu Dhabi national vision. And it's the key areas of growth in the UAE and Saudi Arabia that are now really well aligned with Israeli strength, right? We're talking about the diversification efforts of the UAE and of Saudi Arabia. Blue Laurel, we're quite focused on Saudi Arabia because of the real growth story underway there and created by the diversification efforts. But they're focused on water, energy, renewable energy, health, cybersecurity, tourism. This trend of growth in the GCC is a tremendous opportunity for Israeli companies. So it's no surprise when we look at the Israeli ecosystem. Let's start with cyber. Google made its largest acquisition of an Israeli cyber company, Wiz, just a month and a half ago. Israeli healthcare, Israeli health tech, healthcare providers, health innovators are very active around the world. 500,000 Israeli tourists have been to visit the UAE since the Abraham Accords. We're hoping soon that we'll see more tourism come in the other direction. Trade in 2024, they just recently released the numbers, between the UAE and Israel was more than $3 billion. Wow. That was way beyond. It's about triple the estimates of what was before the Abraham Accords, but about 10 times what the actual trade that had been filed and regulated. So we see a real transformation, and there is now a complementarity. 10 years ago, when you were doing this work, 15 years ago, there wasn't as much complementarity between Israel and the startup innovation ecosystem and what was going on in the region. The region is really ready and ripe to have Israeli innovation be a part of its growth trajectory.
And Jay, your firm is very much a part of that.
Yeah, and I echo a lot of the stuff that she mentioned. I mean, at Hub 71, where FortyGuard started, which is also next office to AJC in Abu Dhabi, we host a lot of Israeli startups, but we host almost startups from 60 different nationalities, and there are more than 300 plus startups in the place. And you mentioned a lot of numbers historically. I want to go back historically as well. I think in the UAE, which is, we had a year of tolerance for a reason. We grew up with that. It's part of our, I think, in the UAE, the culture and the heritage. And this is what made it probably a lot simpler for us to establish common grounds when it comes to entrepreneurship and innovation with founders and startups from all across the globe. And I like that. I like innovation because innovation has no agenda other than bringing bright ideas together, and everyone likes and enjoys packing startups and packing founders who have their pain, sweat, and tears into building their ventures. And I think it's also very interesting to see how a lot of those startups, they come or they go, but they come into Abu Dhabi and now they grow into different markets. So for instance, like FortyGuard ourselves, we grew into the US market. Now we have partnerships with like NVIDIA and the likes. We work with a lot of Israeli partners developing our machine learning and AI technology. We have a lot of machine learning scientists, and we work with a lot of other data providers and so on and so forth to build that. And I think, again, I just want to unify the messages that we all come together with no agenda, but only innovation and entrepreneurship, and that allows us to advance. And on that as well, I'd like to mention, obviously, AJC's Abu Dhabi office is doing a lot of work in that sense, and Ambassador Mark, I give him a lot of credit for the work that they've been doing tirelessly to bring founders, to bring businesses, to bring innovators and entrepreneurs together from all across the globe, to be honest, not only Israel and the UAE, but literally everywhere. And a testament to that is that we did the Business Collective visit to Cincinnati, and it was a huge success. We've seen founders from all across the globe, from the UAE, from Israel, from different other places, and we all came together to advance what we have in a common language and take it further. We were all somehow without any walls, no barriers. The conversation was open. There was a lot of excitement for the whole trip, and we all shared the same perspective and the same future that we both or all want to build together. And I like that, because we don't think about anything negative. When you look into the future, you always think about what is possible. And the possibilities to do this is there. And to conclude here, that's why I love the work of AJC's office, I mean everywhere, but especially in Abu Dhabi. Because they complement not only everyone's mission, not only their nation's missions, but I think they complement what this world wants. They want innovation, they want prosperity, and they want peace.
Oh, Jay, thank you very much. That's so encouraging. I'm going to ask a question to all three of you. Short answers. I'm looking at the clock and I'm realizing we have a lot to say and we have very little time to say it. There has typically been far less intra-Arab trade, intra-Middle East trade than trade between the Middle East and Europe, between the Middle East and East and South Asia. Could trade and investment between Israel and its Arab neighbors, even the prospect of Israel someday serving as a Middle East investment and innovation hub, present a new paradigm for the region, greater regional economic integration? I could begin with you, Anurag.
So, thank you. First of all, none of us were paid to say great things about AJC, but I will. It's been 25 years I've been personally affiliated with AJC. A lot of me here representing Indian industry, a lot of the foundation was laid through friendships that AJC facilitated between Israel, the US, and India, from the likes of Stan Bergman, yourself, and obviously the relentless Nissim Rubin over the last 20 years, furthering the friendships that have led to investments. I will say that when we look at, from Indian industry at the region, we really look at it as fertile ground, right? October 7th really interrupted what is a natural, right? There's so much room for job growth, industrial clusters, which comes with innovation, and also just long-term growth in interconnectivity. And it's a few steps that we have to get through, including this very difficult time, but we really see it as fertile ground.
Excellent. Jay?
There's a lot of interconnectivity. I think I do want to mention this. A lot of business has been done just before the Abrahamic Accords happened. You've been part of a lot of those settings. You mentioned it. Tally, I think what happened is that now we strengthen those commitments and those connections just to do further with those things. You mentioned building bridges and the story that before going on stage, we've been building bridges for a very long time, and I think what we're going to do now is just not only build bridges, but build highways and build more infrastructure into taking what we have all together further.
But what Jeff Stone was saying before in the introduction of this whole program was that it was the least regionally interconnected an economic basis. And Tally, you've been fighting this lack of integration across the region your whole professional career. Where is this? Do you see a change in this dynamic?
You're absolutely right, regardless of Israel, right? Yeah. Israel, regional intra-regional trade is about 11-12%. It's nothing compared to the EU, which is at 40-50%. So we got to scratch our heads and say the region is not trading with itself. What does it mean to even be more open? But we have to look at some of the reasons for that lack of inter-regional trade, which has to do with regulatory incompatibility and lack of synchronization. It has to do with overlap in the GCC countries in particular in terms of their strengths. Okay. And so the transformation taking place in the GCC today, particularly Saudi, Bahrain, UAE, towards diversification is about diversification. And all of a sudden, there are actually complementarities, and there are likely to be more complementarities across the region and with Israel as well. And of course, layer on top of that infrastructure, as Anurag has mentioned. So the time is interestingly ripe. I won't say that tomorrow we expect that the MENA region is going to be 50% integrated, but it is an opportunity to kind of go back to the bunting map view of the world, right? Where Jerusalem and the region can become the center of the world on its trade routes if the infrastructure is right, if the regulatory environment's right, and if we continue to identify where those complementarities are.
And we actually have heard exactly that kind of language from, frankly, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia about the region again asserting its sort of centrality economically in so many ways, not just in energy, but in other ways as well. Jay, I want to come back to you. The aftermath of the horrific Hamas attack on Israel, October 7th, 2023, and the related attacks by Hezbollah and other terrorists that followed, a harsh and painful aftermath that turned Arab public opinion even more sharply against Israel, has made it challenging to advance ambitious business ventures. Large investments between Israeli and Arab companies in a public way. What has been the economic fallout that you've seen of the current situation, and do you see it turning a quarter?
I think that what happened in October kept people wondering and questioning a lot, what is going to happen next? We were all in this moment of being lost with our thoughts, and we didn't know what was going on. You know, just like Her Excellency Reem was on stage speaking about how peace could be broken, and such attacks could really add a very difficult time into what we're building, and we've been building for a very long time. I think a lot of folks, and I give a lot of credit to AJC office as well, is that they, after navigating the beginning of the situation, they started to look into where is the opportunity for us to strengthen relationship and see who is committed but really committed to advancing those relationships, because I think in the UAE and the leadership and everyone, not only entrepreneurs, not only for innovation, and not only for all trade and businesses that has been happening and scaling massively between the two countries, we spoke to the commitment that we are behind our agreements, right? And this is what has been happening. And again, I go back, this is culturally how we, everything started. But I think now it's advancing and accelerating a lot further, because although there was a gap, we're using it as a momentum just to pick up on what happened, strengthen the relationship that we have between one another, and build a lot more bridges in the sense of how can we use the same example, which is a great one, and we had a discussion before this of how can we take this to Morocco, how can we take this to Bahrain and other places, and what I'm thinking is how can we take this to the world, right? Not only the Middle East, I think there are a lot of opportunities that we could learn from what happened after October 7 and what can be done into the future, because the future is really massive. Historically, we can go back as much as we want. I know we can connect the dots, but what's really beautiful is how can we see the future, and I think it's really
And also, it must be said that we owe a great debt of gratitude to the wisdom and the vision of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed of the UAE, King Hamad of Bahrain, to King Mohammed of Morocco. Those countries are consistently maintaining their Abraham Accords commitments, and they're moving forward, even if it's less popular these days and less public. But there is no question, there's no turning back. This was a strategic decision. They're moving forward, and that's really commendable. Let me finish with a question to Anurag and to Tally. Let's talk about the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, IMEC, and what it could mean for the region. How does IMEC tie into the overall goal of expanding Arab-Israeli understanding and peace? Who are the key players? Your country is, India is clearly a key player, and Adani Group is clearly a key player. What political steps have to be taken before the IMEC vision could be realized?
So, what you should know, first of all, so when it comes to infrastructure investment, the way we look at it from business terms is you spend the first 5 years of capital expenditure and recouping it, right? And then you spend the next 45 years actually making money off of it. So this triggered us to buy the port in Haifa in 2021. And we really believe there's a connectivity between the fact that we have 14 ports across India, including the western tip of India, our flagship port, Mundra. 30% of all goods coming in and out of India are from that port. From that western tip, we see an absolute path to Haifa and then beyond to Europe and elsewhere. And we see this as being a great investment. And so we still carry with us hope for the Abraham Accords and for everyone to understand that you can have overland routes through Saudi Arabia where you create clusters of industrial clusters for energy and infrastructure, create jobs, innovation, going all the way to Haifa and then beyond. So that's the way we look at it. I will say the Indian Prime Minister was in Saudi Arabia 5 days ago, and it's probably the warmest the relationship has ever been. The Prime Minister of India was the first Indian Prime Minister to land in Jeddah. But the idea is that we believe that it's our friendships in the region that are relatively new and can be relatively impactful in kind of creating the interconnectivity between the region. And we do believe that infrastructure investment is the way to do it, and it'll really allow everyone in the region to prosper.
Thank you, Anurag. Tally?
A corridor like IMEC can give access to more than 2.5 billion people for traders in the region. So that's opening up the aperture, certainly for Israeli exporters, but across the board. I was a part of a research project a couple of years ago looking at the regional impact of economic integration. We saw that you could add $1 trillion to the regional MENA GCC GDP if we were to be more thoroughly integrated, and that affects the cost of living in each of these countries, especially Israel with a high cost of living, adding an estimated 2% per year of GDP growth to Israel. That was the estimate at the time. So when we start thinking about what does it mean to bring overland products that come from the east in through Haifa, serving the local markets along the way, that affects real people.
Yeah, excellent. Tally, Jay, Anurag, thank you very much for this fascinating conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you all.